the stream of people has slowed down, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Before we get into the presentation about the NOFA, I'm going to hand it off to Adam to kind of give a brief introduction and talk about some other things. So, Adam.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Wow, we got a great group of people. So thankful that you're all here. We're always interested in trying to promote Orange County as a place for developers to come into the area and build more affordable housing. And so we thank you, because without you, we can't continue to deploy the funding that we get and see more units built. We have an exciting NOFA that Grant's going to talk about this year, has quite a bit of funding. We hope that you have projects that you can bring to us. One of the things that we worked on a year ago was an idea that we had to try to make it easier for city planners, real estate brokers, and especially our developers to determine which projects would score well on a tax credit application. Just make it a little bit easier. We got a grant and we engaged a contract with a GIS company to be able to develop that. My thanks to Jamboree Housing and National Core, who were our test guinea pigs to help us to put this together. And it's so new that really this is the first time that we're utilizing it on any scale. I think it came on our website at the end of last year. And so I just want to, and Grant, if you could allow me to share my screen, I just wanted to show everybody where on the Trust website that is located. Oh, here we go. Okay, so let me move this over. So if you've been on our website, this is our homepage. I'll just start right there. And if you come over to programs, you'll see what Grant's going to talk about, the 2024 Notice of Funding Availability. He'll go over all that. But right below that is the Affordable Housing Amenity Explorer. Here, when you click this, there's a description about what this is. It's basically a heat map that in dark green, the parcels score perfectly 15 points on the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee application process. All the other colors are varying lesser point score degrees. And if you go to, see if I can go to that bottom right-hand corner, it'll expand, then you can zoom in. You can search in the upper right-hand corner by address, or you can just find your parcel, zoom in, click on it, and when you, I'll just pick any random parcel, but when you click on this dark green parcel, I can get to it, then there is a box that will come up. It will tell you about the parcel. It'll tell you the various score factors, how close that parcel is to the various amenities that the Tax Credit Allocation Committee assigns, such as parks, grocery stores, medical, the whole list. And so we hope that you find this as a useful tool. We would love your feedback. So by getting your feedback, we can help to improve this and make it a tool that is a best practice for Orange County and an example of what other regions in the state can consider. So we're hopeful this is really good for you. And with that, does anybody have any questions before I hand it back over to Grant? Just go ahead and speak, raise your hand. I'm not sure I see everybody, but go ahead. Well, you can throw your questions into the chat or Q&A if you think of something later, but I will now stop my sharing and turn it back over to Grant.
Thanks, Adam. Let me just get this back up on the screen and make sure there's nobody else waiting here for us. Okay, looks like everybody that has tried to join is currently in here. So thank you all for being here. And Now we're going to talk about the Trust 2024 NOFA. We have a lot of money available this year, and there are some significant changes to the NOFA from last year's NOFA. So I see some folks that have applied and successfully received funding in the past from the trust. So I'm very glad that they're here. I'm glad that all the new folks are here as well. And hopefully we have a good crop of projects and applications that come in here in 2024. So I'm going to start with an overview. This is one of the biggest changes in the NOFA this year is the eligible cities. In the past, we have had separate NOFAs, like for Irvine and Yorba Linda. In 2022, we had a NOFA just for those two cities. Instead of doing that again, we have incorporated all of the money that the trust has available into this one NOFA. And different cities are eligible for different pots of funding. This is entirely due to when cities got into compliance with state housing law. So when their housing elements were certified as compliant, and more recently when they have gotten all of their zoning required by their housing element in place. So for 2022, it's only Irvine and Yorba Linda that's available for that pot of funding. And I'll go over how much funding is in each one of these eligible years. So for 2022, it's just Irvine and Yorba Linda. It expanded in 2023 to quite a few more cities. And then for this year, as of the first of this month, there were a couple of additional cities that were eligible in addition to the 2023 cities, as well as any city that gets into compliance with state housing law by May. Also, there are a couple of cities in the county that aren't trust member cities that are currently in compliance with state housing law. Brea is a great example. So you'll notice that Brea is not on this list. They are not a trust member city. But if they happen to join before applications are due under this NOFA, they would become an eligible city as well because they are in compliance with state housing law. And this list of cities is in the NOFA. So if you need to refer back to it, also this entire thing is being recorded. So it will be posted on the trust website if you want to refer back to it later.
And Grant, just to chime in, we're currently talking to Los Alamitos and Brea about joining the trust. No confirm. With Los Alamitos, we have a city council date coming up soon, and they are attempting to join the trust before the March deadline. I have not received word yet from Brea about a council meeting, but I've met with them already.
Okay, great. And Cindy and Colin, I see your question about Placentia. Let me, towards the end of this, let me come back to that. I need to double check in the NOFA. It could be that I just left it out of the slideshow, but I just need to double check that for you. But let me check. Or Adam, could you check while I'm giving this presentation?
Well, I am on the HCD website that shows the compliance up to date right now, and Placentia shows that they are not in compliance.
Okay, then that's why Placentia is not there. Thank you. So we have about $25.7 million available, and it's broken out into the years that we just discussed. For 2022, we have about 6.5. For 2023, we have 9 million even, and for 2024, we have about $10.1 million. The source of those funds is primarily Mental Health Services Act and Local Housing Trust Fund funds. So for 2022 and 2023, those two sources make up the entirety of what's available. And projects will need to have funds from both of these sources in each project. So you won't be able to apply just for the local housing trust fund funds. Those funds have to have a match of funds from a local source. In this case, we're using the MHSA dollars as that local source. And for every dollar of local source, you get 95 cents in local housing trust fund dollars. So you will see that there is 95%, or this local housing trust fund. Sorry. Let me figure out how to go back here. This local housing trust fund amount is 95% of the MHSA amount for both 2022 and 2023. In 2024, we also have $1 million of county general funds available, and almost 4.4 in MHSA and 4.75 in local housing trust fund available. And those dollars, again, both the MHSA dollars and the county general funds must be used as a local match for the local housing trust fund. So our loan limits have increased this year. This is one of the other big changes that you'll see. So our loan limits are now $3.5 million per project. That can be waived by the trust board, as it has been in the past. In the past, this had been $2.5 million. When the trust started having these NOFAs in 2020, the number was $2.5 million. And over the past 4 years, we've seen construction costs increase about 40% in California. So this increase to $3.5 million really brings us back up to where we were in 2020 in hopefully how effective our money is and how many units can be built. Similarly, we've also increased the per unit subsidy amount 40% from what it was in 2020. We've increased this one over the years a little bit, but this is an increase from last year as well. There are different per unit loan amounts for different bedroom sizes for all non-MHSA funded units. MHSA funded units are all priced at the same. The maximum loan amount is $191,600 per unit. And this is a MHSA wide maximum for each unit. So the County of Orange also has MHSA dollars available through their NOFA. You can't layer trust funding and county funding that comes from MHSA on the same unit. So you can't double that number coming from two different sources. That's the maximum for MHSA dollars for each specific unit. So the timing of our funds, because we have funds that were awarded in 2022 and 2023, those funds will be available fairly quickly. After projects are awarded funding, we'll have money available for those projects within about 120 days. That 120 days covers the time it will take us to draft and negotiate loan documents. And then HCD will have 90 days to review the documents and get funding to the trust. So the funding has been awarded, but it's not yet in our bank account. It is still with the state. So that 90 days is to get them to approve our documents and get us funding. So we expect that for projects that are applying and receiving funding from the 2022 and 2023 years, we should have money available by about October. And then for funding that is awarded for 2024, that funding is going to take quite a bit longer to be received. That partly we will be applying for funding from HCD for the Local Housing Trust Fund program for 2024. And that we expect to receive that funding award announcement sometime late in the year. HCD, I believe, says August of this year. In general, we get it closer to October or November over the past couple of years. So that's what we're expecting. And our funding awards will be contingent. The 2024 funding awards will be contingent until we get that award from HCD. And then those funds will be available sometime in the middle of next year. Once we get that funding award, HCD will have to provide the trust with their standard agreement. That tends to take another couple of months. And then again, we have that about 120-day negotiation, loan document drafting, negotiation, and then review by HCD before those funds are available. So, we expect those funds to be available in the middle of next year, which works well for projects that are applying for tax credits towards the end of 2024. All of our funds from the trust are allocated evenly. Well, we try to allocate them evenly between the 3 service planning areas in Orange County, so north, central, and south. As long as there are projects that are applying for funds in each of the SPAs, we are going to look at those projects first and rate the projects within their SPA first before we make that money available to other SPAs. So, for example, if we have a bunch of projects in the North SPA that are all very good scoring projects, and we have fewer projects in the Central SPA maybe that aren't quite as good scoring, we're going to still award funding to those projects in the Central SPA before we move additional money into the Northern SPA. And so if you have a project in maybe a less competitive SPA that doesn't score as well, you can still receive funding because we think it's important as a trust to ensure that we are funding affordable projects throughout the county and not just in the places where affordable projects are often placed in Orange County. So now we're going to look at some of the other threshold requirements in order to receive trust funding. This first one is new in Orange County. One of the things that the JPA for the trust requires is that, or doesn't allow, the trust cannot fund projects in cities where the local jurisdiction doesn't support the project. So if the city council doesn't support the project that you are applying for, we will not be able to provide funding for that project. And to prove that you meet that requirement prior to funding, so not as part of the application, but prior to funding your loan, we're going to require a letter from the city manager, community development director, or other official that has the ability to sign a letter that says that the elected body is aware and supports the project. And for most projects, this isn't an issue because either there's entitlements that you need from the city, or there's funding you need from the city, and the city's very well aware of the project and is supportive of it before we get to the point where we're trying to fund the loan. But another trust, near us has had a problem where a city was not supportive, and but the project was trying to move forward anyway. So we've added this just as a a little bit of safety for the trust to make sure that we are meeting all of our requirements to our trust member cities. For projects that are receiving MHSA funding, the all of those units that are MHSA funded, the tenant selection has to go through the county's coordinated entry system. If cities are providing vouchers for the project and are requiring a local preference, and this really only applies to Santa Ana and Anaheim projects, we can accommodate the local preference through the coordinated entry system, but all of those units still have to go through the coordinated entry system. And then we have added in a definition of homelessness to our loan documents and to the NOFA this year. So projects have to, MHSA funded units have to serve people that are chronically homeless as defined by the McKinney-Vento Act. If in the future there is nobody who is chronically homeless in Orange County, then it's people who are actually homeless, at risk of homelessness, or inappropriately housed, as we successively eliminate each of those categories of residents in the county, which is certainly our goal long term. So it'd be great if we don't have anybody that is chronically homeless anymore, but until we do, MHSA units need to be going towards people who are. The income limits for all trust units, regardless of funding source, is 30% of AMI or below. Trust funded units will need to use HCD rents, or if the TCAC rents are lower than the HCD rents, you can use the TCAC rents. This is a requirement of the Local Housing Trust Fund program and the funding that we receive from it. So just keep in mind of what your rents will be for trust funded units when you are preparing your pro forma as part of your application, and then as you get through the lease up period, that you need to be using HCD rents, not TCAC rents, unless the TCAC rents are lower. MHSA funded units will need to provide a $500 per unit per year replacement reserve that increases 5% every year. All other trust funded units will need to provide a $350 per unit per year replacement reserve. In addition to the replacement reserves, MHSA funded units need to have a capitalized operating reserve, or a rental subsidy, a project-based rental subsidy. So either, in general, that means COSER from the county, project-based vouchers from either a city housing authority or through the county, or just capitalizing money up front to provide that capitalized operating reserve. Unfortunately, VASH vouchers can't be used as one of the project-based rental assistance programs. There's simply not enough residents that qualify both under VASH and MHSA to have that work. We were on a couple projects early on, we did use VASH vouchers, and we had a very hard time leasing up those units. So we no longer allow for VASH vouchers to be used. And then new for this year, we've added a bunch of HCD required policies. these are things that through the local housing trust fund program, projects need to comply with. So it includes housing first policies, compliance with the Pet Friendly Housing Act, prevailing wage, unless a project meets one of the uh, waivers for prevailing wage, and we're going to let developers and applicants figure that out with the Department of Industrial Relations. We just say you have to comply with prevailing wage unless you meet one of the exceptions, and then there are accessibility and non-discrimination policies that have been included in the NOFA that is required by HCD. So more detail about all of these are in the NOFA, but if you have any questions, please let me know. Moving on to project scoring. So this hasn't changed a ton from last year, and it is very similar to a 9% TCAC application. So our project scoring is based on project readiness, developer experience, neighborhood amenities, whether or not the project is listed in the trust development pipeline, and affirmatively furthering fair housing. There's a maximum of 118 points available. For project readiness, there's a maximum of 35 points. One place that this has changed is that for projects that are applying for funding from 2022 or 2023, will get full points if they are scheduled to be to commence construction by the end of this year. For projects applying for funding in 2024, maximum points for acquisition rehab projects will be available for projects that are planning to commence construction by the end of 2025. And for new construction, that date is June 30th, 2026. For projects that expect to commence construction after any of these dates, 1 point will be deducted for every month past those dates. So you can still apply even if you don't maximize these point scores, but the point scores will go down 1 point for every month after these dates. For developer experience, there's a maximum of 40 points. Developers are awarded 1 point for every 10 units of permanent, supportive, or affordable housing that the applicant has developed and currently operates. So, if you are a developer that just develops and then sells the projects, those projects that you've developed won't really get you points unless you also currently operate projects. And developers need to score at least 20 points in this category to be eligible to receive funding. For service enriched locations, this is very similar to a 9% tax credit application. There's a maximum of 25 points here. And we have categories for grocery stores, medical care, community centers, public parks, transit, and new this year for us is schools. And our requirements there are the same as TCACs. Unique to the trust is this category for being in our development pipeline. There's 10 points available here, and this is either you have 10 or you have 0. So it's for projects that are on our development pipeline no later than December 31st of last year. So, either you got this by now or you don't. But for next year, if your project isn't on our development pipeline, you can add it at on our website. So ochft.org/development pipeline. And we did send out an email about this in December to try to ensure that people added their projects before the deadline. Affirmatively furthering fair housing is identical to the requirements for a 9% application. You can get up to 8 points if you are in a high or highest opportunity area based on the 2023 TCAC HCD opportunity area map. They haven't released the 2024 map yet. So can can everybody, I just saw a message that somebody can't see my screen. Can everybody else see it? Okay, I got one thumb up. Um,
Yeah, I can see it, Grant.
okay. Delton, if you drop off and maybe try to join back in, hopefully you'd be able to see it. I can also email out this presentation. Um, and like I said, this should be available um, uh, online after the presentation. Okay, so this map shows where all the high and highest opportunity areas are. There's a link in the NOFA to HCD's map, so you can look more specifically, zoom in, be able to see if you fall in one of these areas. So we've never had a project or two projects that have scored identically and have had to use a tiebreaker, but we have a tiebreaker just in case. So if two projects are located in the same service planning area and they receive the same score, we'll use a tiebreaker to figure out which one to prioritize if we don't have enough funding for both of them. So basically, the tiebreaker is how effectively are trust funds being used in the project? And the tiebreaker is calculated to take the total funding request from the trust divided by the total number of affordable units in the project. So that's not the total number of trust funded affordable units, but the total number of affordable units overall. So if two projects are both requesting 3.5 million for the same number of units, the trust funds, but one of the projects is a 200 unit project and the other one is a 50 unit project. The 200 unit project would win because it is more effectively using trust dollars to get more affordable housing in the county. So that is kind of all of the threshold and scoring requirements. Now onto the application itself. The application hasn't changed much from previous years. Our application is done online. It's through a Google form. There are screenshots of every page of the form in the NOFA. You can see a screenshot of the first page here on the slide. And it's available at the link here on the screen, which is also on the Trust website and in the NOFA. And you can submit an application today if you want to, although they are not due until March 15th. So one application per project, but each applicant can submit multiple applications if they have multiple projects. We have had that in the past from a couple of developers that have received funding for multiple projects in the same year. So feel free to apply on multiple projects, just one application per project. The application deadline, like I said, the initial application deadline is March 15th. One change that we've made this year is that we've set application due dates for each board meeting throughout the year after the May board meeting. So if we still have money available after that May board meeting, we're going to accept applications through June 14th and take them to the July 15th board meeting for consideration. In the past, this has been done on a first come, first served basis. One change for this year is that for all applications that are received by each application date, we are going to evaluate those applications against one another the same way we would evaluate applications against one another that are submitted by March 15th. And so that is, like I said, one change, and the scoring criteria, the way we evaluate will all be based on the same scoring criteria that we just talked about. So that's how that will work this year. Hopefully it goes smoothly. But with $25 million available, it won't surprise me if we have money available after May 15th. Although hopefully we get 10 applications in here in the first, by March 15th, and all the money goes out the door very quickly. But if that doesn't happen, we'll have applications due, subsequent application due dates as shown on the screen and in the NOFA. So I've kind of talked about all the revisions that we've made from the previous years, but I just kind of wanted to summarize them very quickly. So we've increased the per project and per unit loan limits. We've added the requirement for this local jurisdiction acknowledgement letter prior to the award, or sorry, that should be prior to the funding of a project, not prior to the award. So we don't need it as part of the application, but we need it prior to when we actually fund the project. We have revised the project evaluation and subsequent funding rounds. We've updated the project scoring to include schools as a scoring category. And we've accelerated the readiness dates for projects applying under both 2022 and 2023 allocation years. And then we added all of those HCD required policies for the Local Housing Trust Fund program. And that is the entire presentation. I am happy to answer questions, either if you want to put them in chat or if you want to raise your hands and unmute yourself and ask. Either way works. But if people have questions, and then as always, I'm available to answer questions if you want to give me a call or send me an email.
Grant, while we wait, I hope that if anybody has any questions, they won't be shy. But while we're waiting, if everybody could throw their name and company that they are representing on this call, that would be helpful for us to keep track of who came to this meeting, just so we can announce that to our board and let them know the interest that we have in our NOFA. Also, if anybody needs further clarification on the questions they had in the chat that I tried to answer, please chime in right now. I've been trying to keep up with the questions while Grant was talking. And last thing, while we're still waiting, if any of you have feedback on an idea that we're promoting and trying to roll out within the end of the first quarter of this year, it might take a little bit longer, but we received a small grant as kind of a seed funding to start a pre-development and acquisition loan program, a revolving acquisition and pre-development loan program. We are applying for additional funding for that idea. The thought is that developers, and actually we're writing it for cities as well, can apply for a very low interest, below market rate acquisition and pre-development loan that would be utilized for anywhere between 1 and up to potentially 5 years, although we're hopeful that it would be 1 to 3. And the intent there is to provide that funding that developers need during the pre-development stage, especially, and be able to help you to be competitive as you put offers in on properties in Orange County that you need some additional funding, and it would be paid off at the time of construction loan closing, and then that will be revolved back into the fund to be able to be utilized for other projects. I don't have any answers to you on interest rate terms, but we are modeling this after other programs we've been looking at, and hopeful that we can give you something that's very competitive to what you're currently considering.
All right, so I don't see any questions in the chat, and I don't see any hands up. So I think with that, unless anybody has any last minute things, we're going to wrap this up. And thank you all for joining. And we look forward to receiving your funding applications. And like I said, if you have any questions that come up after this, please feel free to give me a call or send me an email. And we will make sure that you can successfully at least apply and hopefully receive some funding from us. So thank you, everyone.